Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. It's April 13th, 2023. I have a special co-host today. His name is Chris Letman. And Chris has joined us here briefly before. My regular co-host, John Weaver, had to be at a site visit today. As you know, John is a solar developer in the flesh, also journalist for PV Magazine. Shout out to John Weaver. He does such wonderful work for our industry. And I was just reminiscing with Nico Johnson, host of the Suncast podcast this morning, about how John and I got together. It's a wonderful story. So anyway, you can look for that on the Suncast podcast. I'm going to be on one of their Tactical Tuesdays coming up, hopefully in May. We'll see. I have a couple of quick announcements, and then we're going to get into the clean energy news with Chris Letman. First, I wanted to let our listeners know that if you don't have the Midwest Solar Expo on your calendar, May 1 to 3 in Chicago, you absolutely want to do that. MidwestSolarExpo.com. Okay. And some of the speakers are Kerry Zalewski, who is the chairman of the ICC. I'm going to be interviewing Kerry on stage for that. Representative Sean Casten, who is a congressman from Northern Illinois, is going to be a speaker. Zed Ashai, the CEO of Nexamp. Leslie McCain, the executive director of ISEA, the Illinois Solar and Storage Association. Kiran Batraju of Arcadia Power is going to be a speaker. And Utopia Hill, the CEO of Reactivate. So many wonderful speakers. It's an intimate affair. There will be around 300 to 500 solar professionals, and there's a trade show, and then of course concurrent sessions. The action is May 2 and 3, but it kicks off in the evening on May 1 in the Chicago suburbs. So go to Midwest Solar Expo. I really hope to meet lots of my listeners and colleagues there in Chicago. And then I also, as always, want to remind our listeners that the Clean Power Hour is brought to you by Chint Power Systems, CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the US. That's 20,000 projects now that Chint inverters are being used on. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication and controls and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. Well, without further ado, I want to welcome Chris Letman to the show. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Tim. Great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time guest host. So I'm
Yeah,
excited. Yeah, this is
it's
great.
awesome. It's
Yeah,
awesome to have another OG in the solar industry like yourself on the show. Thank you for being a listener and
absolutely.
for making time for us today. It was a last minute thing that John had to step away for a project, and I get it. And so you're very kind to step
Yeah.
in his stead. For our listeners, why don't you tell us a little bit about your trajectory in the solar industry, just the cliff notes. I know
Yeah,
it's a long
yeah.
story, but what are you up to in the solar industry?
So I got my hands in a lot of things going on, primarily right now with the module sales with representing Hyperion Solar, which is a module manufacturer based in Thailand. And they will have 9 gigawatts of capacity coming up here by the end of the year. There will also be launching a U.S. facility somewhere in the southeast, 4 gigawatts. And then with the CL Green Energy Consulting, I do basically project brokerage, not from a fiduciary sense, but more of a kind of a matchmaker between developers and investors, and find the right project for the right buyer, and the right developer for the right investor. So been in the industry now just over 14 years as of February, and it's definitely been one hell of a ride. But I love what I do. I love the people that I work with, and I just see this industry could continue to grow, continue to face, the challenges that we faced, legislation wise and supply wise and labor wise, but we still persevere. So it says a lot about the people that work in this industry.
It takes staying power to, stick with any industry, frankly.
Sure,
There's a lot
absolutely,
of
yeah,
ups and downs in the solar industry. We call it the solar coaster. And but it is a upward trajectory, right? We're we're
absolutely,
zigging
yeah,
and zagging our way to 10xing this industry now in the next 25 years. So it's a huge opportunity. And so if you're young or mid-career or even late career, if you have
yeah,
10 years of career left, hey, get into solar.
yeah,
Come join us from oil and gas or any other infrastructure related. If you're in real estate, solar is a great industry. Solar is real estate, right?
yeah,
So, well, let's get into the news, Chris.
yep,
I want to cover one of your stories first. Bigger modules, bigger headaches. That
yeah.
is a story that John and I have covered over the years now. What's the story? You found a story in PB Magazine, which I will put on screen.
Yeah, so basically, we're seeing the next generation, the N type or the TOPCon tunnel oxide passivated contact cell, which is a larger, higher efficiency cell than the current P type cell that's going into the modules, which is slightly smaller. So we're seeing a higher efficiency in the laboratory. We're seeing a slightly higher efficiency at the module level. The manufacturer's claim behind the motivation on the switch here is that it will adjust or lower the levelized cost of energy, the LCOE,
Mhm.
by using obviously fewer modules, same footprint, less labor, less balance of system, etc. What I'm reading from this article, but also talking to industry experts, especially on the engineer side, and especially in the racking community, there's some concerns, obviously, with cell crack defects. These are cross cracks that are occurring in some analysis in the laboratory, when they're doing testing, and this could be attributed to the larger format of the module itself, because of the flexing of the frame itself is causing these bigger cells to potentially crack. Now it's not happening, and they're not saying which cells are they're happening to, but it is a concern. I think once we start seeing these modules, and we're seeing them now, north of the 600-watt range, it's going to be interesting how that plays out with engineering. Not so much going towards that larger format cell. They may stay with the TOPCon module, but just not go into that 600 range, because I think you're adding two additional rows on the module itself. So you're adding to the frame, you're adding a little bit more material. Then obviously the size can be an issue. And these things, if you went to Intersolar recently in Long Beach, out here near where I'm at, these things are monstrous. I mean, they're close or pushing 7 feet in height when they're in the portrait format. So they're definitely big. And then of course you've got concerns with carrying these modules, but that's the main concern.
Yeah, I mean, I do have an affinity for a 4x8 module,
Yeah,
right? Because that is the size of a sheet of plywood, which is a stalwart in the built environment.
sure. Yeah,
And but as you can imagine, right, that the flex in a panel that's 8 feet long, and as you mentioned, these panels are now pushing 7+ feet.
right,
um, it's hard to resist. Now, some of the makers do put a brace in the middle, right, of the panel
right, right,
to strengthen the panel, which is, I think, a great idea.
right.
If you're going to go longer, put an additional brace in the middle. But the cracking of the cells, I mean, these cells are razor thin, right?
Yeah,
And
literally
so,
razor. Yeah,
um, one thing I don't understand, Chris, about solar modules is TOPCon technology can be built into flexible solar modules,
right. The
like
amorphous type cell. Yeah,
the Ridgeline product from GAF, which is a solar shingle for residential.
Yeah.
You see these videos of the roofers installing these modules. They're like 4 feet long and a foot wide,
Right.
and but they're very flexible. So, what is different about TopCon cells in that kind of a module versus regular PV that we're talking about here?
The only thing that comes to mind with that, and I have seen the GAF module, the shingle, and it definitely has it has its place, and it definitely can make an impact. I think just maybe the way the cell is encapsulated between our traditional module that's being used on CNI and utility scale projects versus these more flexible uh, type modules that are being used by the roofing companies. So I think the encapsulation process would probably be different. Um, and obviously you're putting it on a stationary flat surface such as the rooftop, whereas with the racking on a ground mount, you got the elevation, you've got the tilt angle. I see the bigger 600 plus watt modules having maybe a place in fixed tilt racking on the ground, but
Hmm.
not so much with the single axis trackers, which is definitely making a lot of gains in the market. It's my theory, I'm not an engineer, but it's my theory that I think the 550 to 570 watt TopCon module, which will still have the same physical dimensions as the PERC module, but higher wattage, will tend to be the more of a workhorse module out there, especially when it comes to the single axis trackers. But that remains to be seen because it's still very new.
Yeah.
But we'll see it out in the field here really soon.
I mean, the way a module is mounted to a tracker is quite different than fixed tilt racking, and
Exactly.
I can see your point. Basically, the
Yeah.
module is floating more in the wind on a tracker,
Right.
and could be vulnerable to flexing. If it flexes too much, then it's going to
Right.
crack some
Yeah,
of the
because
cells.
it's rocking back and forth, on the torque tube. So you've got the wind coming through, you've got the flexing of the module because of the torque tube,
It's really the wind, though. The
rotating.
torque tube is moving very slowly, right? Tracking
True. Yeah, right,
tracking
right.
the sun. I mean, unless it's going into stow mode or something like that,
Yeah.
it's more the wind that I think that's the concern.
Yeah,
Good story.
absolutely. So we'll
And
see. We'll see
it's
what happens.
yeah, exactly. The only time will tell. I mean, I think eventually someone will come up with some standards for this, sizes. Like that's the weird thing about solar modules. They're all a slightly different size,
Yeah.
and that's hard for the racking companies. It's hard
Yeah.
for the installers. It's hard on the logistics. So many things. It would be good to just say, okay, it's going to be this in North
Right.
America, like we have other standards
Right.
for tires or automobiles or
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
a lot of variability in that, and I think reaching a standardization is key to being more efficient and speeding up the process from the engineering side all the way through the construction and operation side.
yeah.
Yeah, be nice to have.
Well, let's talk about this story from Canary Media. Uh, they call it Chart of the Week. And a story by Eric Wessoff and Maria Virginia Olano at Canary Media. Check out canarymedia.com. And the news is that coal has been surpassed by renewable energy now in the United States. So we're generating more clean energy, solar and wind, than we are coal power. And you see the black line on this chart. Coal has just been stepping down consistently for the last 12 years. This chart goes back to 2010, and um, and it's economics that is driving this, right? Coal power is these thermal plants are more expensive to run, so the LCOE is not competitive, and so it's being supplanted by wind and solar, and this is this right now this curve is fairly straight, but it's gonna escalate. And then you see nuclear, which is completely flatlined. Um, and there's really no future for the nuclear industry, unfortunately, even though the DOE is trying to revive it. Um, And then you see fossil gas. And this is the bad news, Chris, with this story, I think, is that we're still growing our footprint of fossil fuels use in the US and, of course,
Yeah.
globally as well. I mean, heck, that's the weird thing about China, some of these more mature markets where they have a huge solar industry, more than twice the size of the US solar industry, right, in China, but they're still building coal plants in parallel, trying to provide enough grid power to their fast growing society.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a strange dichotomy for sure, and you know, I track a lot of the coal closures across the country, and those are a lot of the same sites where you're starting to see, and already have seen, both solar development and solar farms coming under construction. So it's replacing the coal generation plants there, but I continue to see news of new peaker plants for gas. And California, the state I currently reside in, is still looking at gas peaker plants as a backup. And I think Texas just announced they're passing a bill to keep that industry not only alive but growing out there. And Texas is number two in the country in terms of installed capacity. They're just behind California. Um, they're pretty far back from California, and I think Texas can replace California and overall install.
Well, on an annual basis, they have passed California, haven't they?
Yes, they have. You're
In
right.
recent years, right? Just in the last year or two.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, the install base in California has a 10-year head start on the rest of the
Exactly.
country.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no accident that you live in California, right? A lot of solar professionals got into solar in the California market, our most mature market. And then this graph is cool too, just showing the trajectory of wind. Wind is now, uh, half of the renewables portfolio, so to speak, in the US. And solar's starting to catch up though. We've got 145 million megawatt hours of solar versus
Amazing.
434 million megawatt hours of wind. And solar will eventually reach the same level as wind, but it won't be until the 2040s probably when that happens. But in 2050, the grid in the U.S. is going to be something like 40% solar, 40% wind, and then uh, you know a combination of hydro and geothermal and a little bit of nuclear still. I mean, these nuclear plants, like here in Illinois, we're keeping them alive with incentives, which is a good thing. It's cost effective, and it's very low carbon energy. So, um, I don't know. I know California is waffling about this, right? They're considering
Yeah.
keeping. Uh, is it what is the plant that is scheduled to close in Southern California, but
Y- Yeah, I
threatening?
know. Dominguez, near Dominguez Hills, or somewhere in that central part, just inland from the Central Coast area. I can't. The name escapes me,
It's not San
unfortunately.
Onofre, is it?
No, Santa Onofre was a nuclear plant that shut down years ago. That was down there
Okay,
by Camp Pendleton, Marine Corps base.
yeah. Yeah, I used to surf near that plant, when I went to UC San Diego.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. Some of the best surfing down there. It actually was on the Marine Corps uh, property. So when I was active duty, a lot of friends that were civilians, would always, ask if I could join them out there just to get them onto that particular section of the beach because of the break was phenomenal. But yeah, so good times.
yep. All right. So our next story is, um, yeah, I like this story. Community solar. Bringing community solar to low income customers is harder than it looks. And it's a story about Reactivate and Utopia Hill. Utopia is going to be at the Midwest Solar Expo. She is one of the speakers. And uh, Reactivate is a collaboration of Invenergy and one other developer. I can't remember the name of that company, but doing a lot of work with low
Yeah,
and middle income populations. And in general, right, community solar is a great way to bring solar to the masses because
absolutely.
you don't have to own a roof. you could live in an apartment and participate in community solar, right? Anybody in Illinois, for example, now in Ameren or ComEd territory can subscribe to a community solar project, and then you're just getting some of your electrons from that project, and then still connected to the grid. And it's all the calculus is done with over virtual net metering, and it's a really good thing. But um,
It's not.
it's what were you
It's
going
not
to say,
without its
Chris?
challenges. No, I was gonna say it's not without its challenges. But we're definitely making headway, and there's a lot of great companies out there that are trying to solve for these challenges, along with the company in this article that you're talking about here. So
Yeah, reactivate. And
yeah,
you know, um, these consumers, low and middle income consumers, are spread thin. They're holding down multiple jobs. They're just struggling to keep it all together, so to speak, in ways that higher income people are not. And so they don't have the bandwidth to digest a 10-page contract
yeah,
when that the subscriber comes knocking, whether that's Arcadia or Nexamp or any of the dozen or so companies that are now signing up subscribers in markets like Illinois. You're getting a similar market now, finally, in California, right? With
right,
community solar. We had
right,
renewable properties on the show a couple of episodes ago talking about
sure,
the new California community solar legislation, which hopefully this time will stick, right?
yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed,
But I think that's kind of the thrust of this article, is that um, low and moderate income people don't trust the system. They're skeptical, and so when these professionals who are credible come knocking, not I mean, it's a mixed bag. John
yeah,
and I often talk about the solar industry being the Wild West. It is a very still young industry, even though the modern solar era started in 2010. I like to say you yourself got in 2009, so you were a very
right,
early adopter. The technology's been around since the 50s,
sure,
but it didn't go mainstream until the 2000s, and that's because of the price adoption curve. And it has to make financial sense for any
sure,
technology for society to grab onto it, um, in a larger
yeah.
manner, and that is what is happening.
Yeah, the key thing that I've always seen with community solar is kind of reminiscent of my earlier days, anyways, in educating customers and what solar is and what it is not, what it does and what it doesn't do. And I think a lot of companies out there that are on the subscription side of community solar are also very active in community outreach and education to inform the masses in these neighborhoods of what community solar is doing, and they're trying to make it easy. For instance, signing up without any kind of contractual obligation, like a 12-month agreement or even longer. That's not in the language of what they're signing up for, which is great because they can step in and step out as their needs changes or their financial situations change, and makes it easier for those neighborhoods to adopt a little bit quicker. So there's some companies that are out there doing a good job of education and getting the word out, and it's taken time, but I think as we see more education, more information, and then let's be honest, the incentive has got to be there for these community solar developers and installers, in order to pass the savings on to the neighborhoods that they're trying to create the community solar in.
Indeed. We have some comments from Facebook, and we will acknowledge a few of them here. Reactivate is a joint venture of Lafayette Square and Invenergy. Thank you.
Okay.
And but I want to move on to your story, a story about California. California Senate
Yeah.
Transport Committee passes solar parking canopy and highway side law. What is this bill about?
Yeah, so I just picked up this article very recently, which was passed in the Transport Committee portion of the Senate in California, and it's going to move to the Senate Governance and Finance Committee, and then it's got a few more steps there. It's really interesting because it addresses what this state has and what it does not have, and that's space. Real, let's face it, real estate in California for the most part is very, very expensive to acquire or to lease. What these studies, there were a couple studies done, I'll get into here shortly. They looked at what the potential was on existing um, parking lots and highway spaces, the spaces between the on ramps and the main routes of the freeway. We call them freeways out here in California, highways, that sort of thing. But it looks at what the potential is in terms of footprint and of overall power generation. And I think if this moves and is passed and put into practice, this addresses that land space constraint that California has, and then may also set the example for other states to follow, which is encouraging. So the two main provisions of this article are the bill that's moving through the Senate, exempts on the sales tax for the materials to be used on the solar canopies or carports, and then it
Hmm.
also requires the state to develop and further develop the highway space. Um, I'm not crazy about that portion because I'm a commuter here in California, and getting anywhere in any direction at any particular time can be a challenge. And then when you have construction ongoing, it really slows things down here. But the solar canopy portion is really exciting because there's a lot of building space out here, a lot of parking lot space out here, and one of the studies I think it was Berkeley Labs. What they estimated in the how much pavement makes up of the total surface here in California. Is roughly 35 to 50% of the total space of the surface area
Yep.
here in California, and then they estimate, roughly 101 square miles in LA County alone, which could represent up to 26 gigawatts of capacity on solar canopies and parking lots and things of that nature, which is amazing. I mean, that's going to definitely help us get reach our goals. That we have some pretty lofty goals of clean energy generation and what we rely on here for the future. So
Yeah,
um,
it says the state needs 110 gigawatts of new solar to
right,
reach its RPS of 100% clean energy by
right,
2045, and so that these parking lots could easily produce 25% of the state's power.
right.
Um, and like in LA, that 100 square miles of parking lots in LA
That's a
County
lot.
alone, right?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's a big number.
it's a
So,
very big
yeah,
number.
it's a big number.
And what you pointed out early on is that real estate is expensive, right? California is a very populous place. It's not that there's not rural parts of California, there are, but
There are.
it's farmland. It's very valuable land,
Yep.
pretty much soup to nuts. It's either timberland or farmland or recreational land, right? Parks,
Yeah.
beaches, etc. So it's not like really here in the Midwest where we have a lot of farmland. Like 40% of our corn crop is being used for corn to ethanol. Huge waste of energy, huge waste of resources. Converting that to solar would be much more efficient. Now we only
Sure.
need 2% of the landscape, 1 to 2% um, of the landscape. So it's not a huge percentage of the landscape we need. So those highways, those highway byways or whatever they call them, uh, do make a lot of sense. Um, I think we're going to see this, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you got to have those rights of ways, and so they're just sitting there with grasses, and they have to be maintained. They got to be mowed, and you can put solar on
Yeah.
them, and away you go.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely it addresses, numerous issues, not just the need for clean energy, which we absolutely all need in any state, really, um, but with the land constraints that we have here in California, and to your point, with what needs to be maintained, putting in, solar, you know, smaller fields and smaller solar farms, will address some of the issues that we're facing right now with both the clean energy production as well as land constraints. So it's pretty encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I found a good EV story
Oh, great, great.
in
Love that.
Canary Media, and the title of this is Biden aims to supercharge EV adoption with new emissions standards. The administration really accelerated our trajectory for electrification of transportation and the built environment in general last year with the IRA legislation, or IRA. And now there's a proposal. I got to get this on screen from uh, the administration, the EPA specifically, to basically fast track emissions reductions from from cars and trucks. And this is, transportation accounts for 27% of U.S. carbon dioxide emissions as of 2020. So this is a big part of our carbon footprint. And these standards would require automakers' fleets to produce far less pollution, both carbon emissions and ambient air pollution. And so they're looking to uh, put the EV industry on track, right, for EVs to make up 2/3 of new light duty vehicles by 2032. So in just 10 years, right, or 9 years from now. And um, and that's a step up from the previous goal of 50%. So now they're going for 66% of new car sales by 2032. Now, we know this is totally doable, Chris, right? Because
Absolutely.
our
Yeah.
European cousins are already doing this.
Yeah. We're
80%
behind the
of new
curve.
car sales are battery electrics in Northern Europe, in places like Norway. And
Yeah.
in major economies like Germany, it's not quite so high, but it's quite high. I think it's in the 60 percentile range in Germany. In the US, we're at 6% of new car sales, right, being EVs today here in 2023. So it's really quite paltry compared to what's possible. And and the government is doing things like providing tax incentives so that EVs are more accessible to the average consumer, which is vital because these cars are a little more
Absolutely.
expensive. Um, I keep my eye on EV prices, and they're not cheap.
No, no, they're not. I was reading another article earlier this morning. They were talking about, they didn't mention the company, but they're trying to set up a leasing program for EVs, and I think it's being spurred by the Inflation Reduction Act. So there might be some, tax equity incentives if these companies can lease the vehicle, or even do like a shared vehicle program, or that type of thing. So it's interesting. I think one of the biggest concerns, at least I hear from, folks around me, friends and neighbors and family, they like the idea of an EV. They like, obviously driving a clean vehicle to and from work and around town. But everyone seems to fear the range anxiety that's being talked about. And we hear and see a lot about that. But I think we're addressing that. We're trying to build out that infrastructure, which is key. So you can travel, cross country and go in any direction and not have any issues. I'm sure when the internal combustion engine came out, and the access to gas stations back in that day were probably of concern. So no doubt, the same exists for EVs. But I think we can address that and build out that infrastructure, and that'll address that concern.
Yes, we're gonna need a lot more chargers, and
Absolutely.
and uh,
Yeah.
and you see them coming. You see them
Yeah.
coming, and you see the announcements. I know Walmart made a recent announcement that they're going to install chargers at a lot of their retail stores in
I
numerous
read that.
states.
Yeah, I read
And it
that. I
just
read
makes
that.
good sense, right? You want if you're a retailer, a big box retailer, especially with a huge parking lot, right? You know that there's a great opportunity there to appeal to consumers who are going to be increasingly buying EVs and are going to want to charge between stops.
Right.
If they don't have especially if they don't have a charger at home, you really want a level 2 charger at home. As a former Tesla owner, I know this firsthand. It was essential to have a level 2 charger at home, and it's not out of reach. It was $500 to install a level 2
Hmm.
charger, and that way you get 20 miles an hour of range charging or something like that.
Right.
Um, but and then the supercharger network, it's a both and, right? We want level 2 chargers and then superchargers. It's both and. Level 1 does nothing for me. I can't get excited when people announce, "Oh, we're installing level 1 chargers." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." Uh, it's chump change in terms of range
Yeah.
per hour, right, of charging.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
on the order of 5 miles an hour or something like that,
Yeah.
that you get with a 120 volt charger, right? You need a 240 volt, 30 amp
Yeah. That's not
charger,
going to cut it.
um, to get any kind of meaningful range for your EV. So,
Yep.
all right. Well, let's move along. We're cooking. We're
Yeah.
covering some good ground. Polysilicon production in the U.S. unlikely. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I came across this article, and you got to kind of consider the uh, the company that was interviewed. So the company that was interviewed on this article was GCL. Everyone knows GCL to be a major polysilicon producer. However, their polysilicon plant is in the Zhejiang region, which is under the UFLPA enforcement. So that's take that with a grain of salt. But basically, what they're saying is polysilicon production in the U.S. looks, unlikely. It's definitely unlikely, in my opinion, for them. There are a couple companies, I think Hanwha and Hemlock Semiconductor come to mind. Two
Yep.
different companies there,
Yep.
Hanwha and Hemlock, but they're making a go at it. I think for the short term, the U.S. market, and we're seeing this now with all these major announcements from several um, global solar panel manufacturers that they're setting up shop or they're expanding their existing operations here as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is great. I think it's the first step in the right direction. Definitely would love to see more polysilicon production out here in the U.S. It's going to take time. Um, I think there's some hesitation by companies because we don't know how long the Inflation Reduction Act will be in place. We have our expectations of how long, but
Right.
I think the module assembly, module manufacturing is the right steps at the right time in these current years. Further on down the road in later years, to see the raw polysilicon being produced and wafers and cells being manufactured is going to happen. Not necessarily in that order, though.
Yeah. Yeah. We should note that GCL is one of the plants, um, that is under enforcement of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the
Right,
UFLPA. And
right,
so when they say, this article points out that they have concluded they can produce polysilicon ingots at 1/5 the price of what they could do in the United States. I'm like, well, bro, you're using forced labor. So I don't even want to have that. I don't want to have that
yeah,
debate. It's like, yeah, we have different standards. We have different labor standards here in the United States. We have higher wages. We have better benefits. We have shorter work weeks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're not perfect, mind you. We're far
right,
from perfect. Uh, but and I did want to mention that this is a story in PV Magazine from Ryan Kennedy, on April 10th. So it's a good story, and
yeah,
it points out a lot of the issues. It's not a no brainer to prop up a big polysilicon factory here in the United States, first and foremost. But
right,
companies are doing it, as you mentioned. Hanwha Q Cells,
yeah,
they are building an ingot to panel factory in Georgia. They already have a panel assembly factory, and now they're going to go a step further and have the full scope of panel manufacture, and there are incentives, right? You get 10% more on the ITC
Right.
if you can make 40% or more of the materials in the solar panel here in the US. I think we're still waiting for some of that guidance from
Yep.
Treasury. Um, but it did say that three Chinese companies, competitors of GCL, have decided to open factories, but they didn't name the companies. Perhaps I couldn't find the
Right.
names, but
Yeah. There's yeah, there's a few of them out there that are making steps towards the polysilicon production. The article didn't call them out specifically, and it's interesting, because you mentioned the Hanwha facility in Georgia. It's looking like the southeast region of our country is going to be like this. Module and everything related kind of hub, and we see racking companies out there, we see module companies out there.
yeah,
It's exciting, and I think those states are going to enjoy some new revenue, some new job creation, which is exciting. Getting in with employees that are maybe leaving an existing industry, as you mentioned earlier in the show, and younger folks, that are entering the job market to get into this exciting industry that we've been involved in for as long as we have. So it's great. It's a great thing. I think we're seeing good things out there in the southeast, and I expect more to come. From other companies and other announcements here.
yep.
So yeah, good stuff.
I think I noted in my interview with Nico that there are 55 gigawatts of solar panel manufacture in the pipeline now in the US in some way, shape, or form.
Wow.
That's a lot more than we currently have.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think we have on the order of 2 gigawatts of panel manufacture in the US, and we're consuming 20 to 25 a year now in the United States. And of course, that's going to go up substantially in the coming years and decades.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so let's
Exciting.
oh, it is.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about the solar industry. It's very dynamic, and that equates to exciting. So you found a story about Sunrun, one of the largest solar companies focused on residential solar,
Yep.
operating in, I don't know, maybe 30 markets in the US.
Yeah.
Many states have Sunrun operations, and their primary business model, I think, is they are a third party owner of the solar facility and then leasing the uh, panels or doing a PPA with the consumer. But what's the story here from Greenstock News? I'm not familiar with Greenstock News.
Yeah, they're a website, and they put out articles on all kinds of different industries that are related to green energy, EVs, storage, new technology. It's an interesting feed that I get from them. Pretty diverse. But with the article, and there was other outlets that had the article. Mentioned about Sunrun. So they're offering this new home solar offering for um, self-consumption during peak hours, and they they clarify that it's not designed for backup power in case of blackouts or power outages. So I guess there's some levers there that aren't included in this particular subscription offering. But what happened was, I think this is addressing the issues with the decrease in the value of solar here in California with the recent passing of the net metering law 3.0, which lowers the value of the power that's not consumed by the homeowner back to the grid. So obviously, storing the power is your best bet. However, you are seeing an increase in cost for the installation of both the solar module, solar system, along with the battery designed for backup or for self consumption during peak hours. So I went to the Sunrun website, try to see if I could find some more information, and I think the article pretty well covers it, and what's being talked about by Sunrun and what they're launching. This program is called Shift. So. I think more information is going to be out there soon from Sunrun. I'm sure they're training their salespeople and their installer partners on how to present it to the consumer. So
You know
we'll
what
see
this
what
is,
happens.
Chris? You know what this is?
Yeah.
This is Sunrun fighting back against NEM 3.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt.
And the NEM 3 is dinging the value of solar electrons, right? They're
Yep.
reducing the value of energy fed from a solar facility back onto the grid, right?
Right.
They're no longer giving full retail net metering, something we still have the luxury of here in Illinois and in other parts of the Midwest. But the writing is in our legislation too, that the value of net metering is going to step down over time. It is a phenomenon that all solar markets experience. So you don't have NEM 3 yet in your state, but watch out. You're going to have NEM 3 in your state probably at some point. And so pay attention to what's going on in California here. But
Absolutely.
the cool thing is that with storage, you can fight back, so to speak, right? When you're using solar to store energy in a battery, then you don't have to put those electrons on the grid, right?
Right.
It doesn't, the grid becomes less relevant and the battery becomes more valuable. So that's the key, right? Is you've got to
Yeah.
pair your solar array with a battery. And Sunrun is basically building this ginormous virtual power plant, right? Lots of solar, lots of batteries, and they become a
Yeah.
grid service to the grid operator. And it's a win-win because then it's affordable
Absolutely. Yeah.
because the you're leasing the facility from Sunrun. You're not paying tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, everyone wants a battery, Chris, but the cost is potentially very prohibitive.
Sure.
Let's be honest.
It is. It is. It is. I've seen, friends and neighbors, on the fence with solar, and then when this came along, and they either had to sign up, before the deadline, which is in 2 days, um, or add the battery. For some, adding that battery pushed them out of the market to go ahead and sign on the dotted line and move forward, and it's unfortunate. And until we see battery costs come down even further, and where it's incorporated into the solar, and it's almost on par with what we're seeing now in installation costs, it's going to be a deterrent for some homeowners and some people who really want to go solar, but just can't add that extra, 25%, I think is a rough average on the additional cost by adding a battery.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Batteries are
stay tuned.
essential. If you're a solar professional, you're a solar and storage professional. You were going to
Yeah.
say something?
No, I said stay tuned for more on this, on how this develops, and what other
Yeah.
states start to move forward. Because I think you're spot on with what you said a moment ago.
Yep.
You gotta look at it, and read the fine print, and read when this is going to affect your state.
Yeah. Um, we have a little time on our hands here, Chris. I want to answer
Yeah.
some of the questions from the chat. Unfortunately, the
Great.
Facebook, we produce the show using a technology called StreamYard, just for anyone who's curious. The cool thing about StreamYard is it allows us to publish or to stream live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube simultaneously. The recording goes on YouTube. So check out cleanpowerhour.com for our YouTube channel and all the recordings of the lives. And then we take the audio and publish it on the audio platform as well. So tomorrow, the full audio of the show comes out every Friday. But we had some comments and questions from our listeners, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't see your names. But um, there was one question about, is there a better battery than nuclear? It's a funny question. And yeah, it's called a battery, or a pumped hydro facility. Nuclear is fine. It does produce nuclear waste, which is radioactive for 10,000 years plus. And we haven't come up with a tried and true long-term storage facility. There's a place called Yucca Mountain in Nevada that's considered, but states have objected to the truckloads and trainloads of nuclear waste going through their territories en route to Yucca Mountain. So there's all kinds of problems with nuclear waste. Eventually, it's a technical problem that we will solve. Okay. Another project is called WHIP, and I talk about this in my interview with Nico also. It's in southern New Mexico. I grew up fighting whip at my dining room table, literally when I was 10 years old, Chris.
Wow.
And whip was designed in a salt cavern geology, which many geologists go, wait a minute, guys, this is not stable. This is not going to be stable geology for 10,000 years. What are you smoking? And they built the facility anyway. It's had some problems. There was a fire. Um, it's messy. So nuclear waste is troublesome, and the cost of new nuclear is prohibitive, which is why we're not building new nuclear plants. We did just turn on Vogtle in Georgia after many years and many cost overruns, and Georgians are paying dearly for Vogtle out the wazoo. But literally, new nuclear power is 4x the cost of new wind and solar.
Yeah.
And so, we need batteries, we need storage. There's all kinds of storage, though, pumped hydro being the most predominant today, but there's gravity batteries, there's thermal technologies, there's all kinds of clean technologies, I think, that are going to be less burdensome on future generations than nuclear will be.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're going to see more. Obviously, as the technology learning curve, starts to flatten out. We're going to see, these companies that are, maybe right now they're in college or they're coming out of their graduate program. They're going to come out with new novel ways to store energy or produce energy. Our grandkids are going to look back and say, oh, grandpa did solar and we're doing, XYZ, and getting, you know, 5 times, 10 times more the clean power production. But we got to start somewhere, and we have to address the issues that we're being faced right now with so many things. So clean energy, it's definitely is the way to get to where we need to get to, and keep our planet cooler.
So we have a great question here. Is there a certain company or path you would recommend for a seasoned salesperson who wants to change careers and start in the
Mm.
solar sales industry for the residential marketplace in West Palm Beach County, Florida? Florida is a hot market. They
Yeah.
don't have great incentives in Florida, but you have great solar resources. And so there is a vibrant solar industry in
Yeah.
Florida. When you look at the volume of installations, it's mostly utility scale because FPL runs the market there,
Right.
and they're installing self-owned utility scale solar. But residential solar, just Google it, you will find residential installers in your neighborhood, in your city, in your area, and go talk to them and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm a sales guy. I want to get into Resi Solar,"
Yeah.
and then go to places like SEI, HeatSpring, reach out to me and Chris on LinkedIn. I will interact with you on LinkedIn. I will not interact a whole lot on Facebook. I'm not a fan. I don't have time for Facebook, but I do have time for LinkedIn. It is a business networking tool and platform, and I'm very active on LinkedIn. So please reach out to me. What are your thoughts about the Resi market in Florida, Chris?
Well, I'll actually be in Florida Monday, and specifically West Palm Beach, Florida.
Oh,
I've
there
got
you go.
yeah, I'm
Are
looking
you
at
going
the
on vacation or
maybe
on
no,
business?
no, it's business, it's business. Yeah, so lot of opportunities out there in both the utility and residential. And to the listener that posted that comment, you're spot on with just do your research. You've been in the sales industry for that long. The same things apply when you go to any company and you're going to represent them. Ask a lot of questions about the company. Their business rating. Their reports. Anything that you can gain from them to understand. How reputable these organizations are out there, and there's a lot of good ones out there. There's a lot of strong ones out there. Um, for me, what I would do is I would do that. I would ask questions. I would reach out to someone that maybe is already in the industry, and not necessarily just have to be in the sales side. If they're an installer, or if they're doing the business end, if these companies are reputable, anyone in any department will be able to tell you a little bit more about the company. So check your LinkedIn contacts. You might have someone already involved in the solar industry to some capacity.
There you go. Chris Letman is going to be in Florida. Um, I want to shine a light on our website for a moment here. And, you know, We are dropping 2 episodes a week of the Clean Power Hour. We do one-on-one interviews. This is a one-on-two interview with Simmons Knife, shining a light on solar O&M. Simmons Knife is a project I developed in Northern Illinois a couple of years ago. The array just turned 3, and we celebrate that by interviewing Colin Murphy, who is the CEO of Simmons Knife, with Josh Richardson, who's the head of O&M for Continental Energy Solutions, a wonderful solar installer and EPC in Northern Illinois, who will also be at Midwest Solar Expo. So check out cleanpowerhour.com. We're doing these one-on-one interviews and then the live, of course. And if you go to the videos tab, you'll see the video episodes, right? These are all on YouTube, right? And you can also just go to the YouTube icon, okay, which takes us to the channel. So many ways to get our content on audio and video. And please give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. You can do that right there at the reviews tab, okay? Rate on Apple, rate on Spotify. That is the most generous and amazing thing you can do for us at our stage of development. We're an established show. I've been podcasting for 10 years. The Clean Power Hour is my 5th podcast, but it's a challenge to rise above the fray. There's a lot of content out there, and the average consumer can only has time to listen to something like 6 different podcasts. So we really appreciate you being here. We do this for
Absolutely.
you, aspiring solar professionals and established professionals who want to up your game in the solar industry. And I want to remind our listeners also that the Clean Power Hour is brought to you by Chint Power Systems, makers of 3-phase string inverters, and they have offices in New Jersey, Texas, and California. With that, I will say, Chris Lettman, thank you so much for being here. How can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find Chris Latman is on LinkedIn. Just put my name in, Chris Latman, and I'm there. And you want to exchange ideas, reach out, connect, learn more about the solar industry, learn more about participating in the solar industry in any capacity. I've been in, the sales side and business development, but I've got resources to connect almost anyone to any type of job related in this field.
Excellent. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Chris, for being here.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
to all our listeners and our sponsors. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage.
All
Take
right,
care,
let's
Chris.
go. See you guys.